U.S. Foreign Policy Chief Hillary Clinton has pledged a further $5.5 million in aid to Syrian rebels during a visit to Turkey. It brings total funding for the opposition to $82 million since the conflict began last year. In Istanbul, Clinton received a far from warm welcome. Riot police clashed with Turkish anti-war activists from a leftist party trying to reach the building where she was to meet Prime Minister Erdogan. Officers responded with batons and tear gas, injuring at least 5 people. Ankara recently stepped up threats to use force in Syria if it feels threatened from across the border. While Western states are stepping up plans for a post-Assad Syria, journalist Don DeBar says that by supporting the rebels, they are only adding to the violence.
There's been some discussion of the possibility of a so-called black ops chemical attack where some of the U.S. agent forces that are on the ground in Syria fighting the government would launch a chemical attack and attempt to lay the blame for that on the Syrian government. I think that's a real possibility. It's a very dangerous game to play. You are, on the one hand, creating an enemy that has no state ties, really isn't domiciled anywhere, and that just is highly weaponized, very angry, and extremely religious. The conduct of war against the government on the soil where the Syrian people live obviously cannot bring peace to the Syrian people. It's intended to provoke a response from the government. The government has the choice of either not responding and allowing armed terrorists to blow things up, to blow up their troops, and to blow up and execute civilians, all of which has been happening, or to fight back, which of course means that there are parts of the cities that get bombed and there are people that are displaced. These two choices are what are being presented by American policy in Syria.
The UN chief has backed the presence of international monitors in Syria, which would provide impartial means of assessing the situation on the ground. The observers' extended mandate expires in less than 10 days, with a veteran Algerian diplomat touted to become the new UN and Arab League envoy after Kofi Annan quit. Here's RT's Peter Oliver.
It's not a job many people would have wanted, you'd think, but considering the situation in Syria, but it seems that Lakhdar Brahimi will be taking over from Kofi Annan as the next special envoy on the Syrian crisis. Now, the 78-year-old former Algerian foreign minister does have pedigree when it comes to dealing with serious conflicts. He was instrumental in forming a peace in the late 1980s in the Lebanese civil war. In 2001, he was sent by the UN as the envoy to Afghanistan as the United States invaded the country following 9/11. He was again sent to Iraq in 2003 for the invasion of that country, representing the UN on that occasion. But it's also interesting to look at what type of an envoy he will be. Kofi Annan had, well, quite openly spoke to both the Syrian rebels and the Assad government. Now, if we look a little bit at Brahimi's personal life and his personal contacts, we might see a different approach from him. Brahimi's daughter, a former BBC and CNN correspondent, is married to one of the sons of the King of Jordan. So strong family ties there. Jordan, of course, a country that has been linked to the smuggling of weapons and other arms into Syria, into the hands of the Syrian rebels. And Jordan, of course, a haven, a place of choice for those defecting from the Assad government to go. So perhaps we could see Brahimi focusing his attention on speaking to the rebels, as opposed to the way that Kofi Annan tried to do it, with speaking to both the rebels and the Assad government. But it looks like he will take over from Kofi Annan, so it looks like the next envoy going to be Lakhdar Brahimi, the former Algerian foreign minister, taking on that difficult job in Syria.
RT's Peter Oliver reporting for us there. Now, Qatar has reportedly tried to bribe the Syrian ambassador in Mauritania, allegedly promising $1 million and political asylum in exchange for defecting. The Syrian diplomat is thought to have turned down the offer, calling it flagrant interference in Syria's internal affairs. Middle East history and politics professor Jeremy Salt says Gulf nations are using their huge financial clout to help topple the government of President Assad.
What it tells about the Gulf states is that they have endless supplies of money, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, to buy people out. And this is the first question that should be asked to all these defectors. How much do they pay you? How much do you get? And there must be some kind of sliding scale. I mean, what is an ambassador worth? What is a foreign minister worth? What is a kind of a low-level representative of Mauritania worth? I mean, he was reported to have been given or offered $1 million plus $20,000 a month for the next 20 years, which, you know, is pretty good. But one would imagine that people higher up the scale would be offered even more. Now, we know right at the beginning of this whole protest movement, the Qataris bribed Walid Muallim, the foreign minister, tried to buy him out, and he refused. He just rejected their offer. So this is a very kind of important part. I mean, anyone who's now high up in the Syrian government, if they want to kind of defect, they're going to get a lot of money, for sure. And they can go and live in Doha, which might not be to everyone's taste, but they will certainly get a lot of money if they turn their backs on their own government.
Coming up on RT, the fallout from the revolution.